Camilla's own sister has apparently decided that 30 years of enforced silence was long enough, and right now, Buckingham Palace is scrambling because the one person who knows where every single body is buried just started talking. Her name is Annabelle Elliot. You might not know her, but you should, because she isn't some disgruntled former butler or a palace aide selling cheap tabloid gossip. She is Camilla's younger sister, the ultimate insider who stood in the shadows during the illicit affairs, the private hunts, the public hatred, Diana's tragic death, and the coronation itself. And according to terrifying new leaks from the Cotswolds, she sat down at a private dinner, had a few glasses of red wine, and finally let it all spill out. Not with screaming or dramatic table slams, but with the cold, bone-deep exhaustion of someone who has been holding up a giant lie for 3 decades and simply ran out of energy to keep lying. The quote causing absolute chaos behind palace walls is devastating. Annabelle allegedly told the table, "She is not the woman the world thinks she is. She has changed. Or maybe this is who she was all along." Think about what that means. If a biographer calls Camilla strategic, people call it an opinion. But when the sister who guarded her secrets through 30 years of outrage, title negotiations, and palace politics says the mask has slipped, that isn't gossip anymore. That is a witness testifying under oath. Insiders report that Annabelle didn't just complain about minor family drama. She described a woman addicted to absolute control, obsessed with status to the point where even her own blood felt disposable. The leaked words were chilling. "You have to understand, she never lets anything go. Not slights, not insults, not old gossip. Everything is calculated, even her kindness." And then came the part about Princess Diana. This is where the story shifts from palace drama to something genuinely heavy. Annabelle reportedly broke down when recalling what it was like to watch Diana disintegrate while everyone around her stayed silent. "We saw how broken Diana was," she allegedly confessed, "and we remained quiet." She revealed that while the entire world was mourning, Camilla showed no remorse, only cold annoyance that public opinion had turned against her. Diana was a storm Camilla calculatedly waited out, stepping right into the crown the moment the air cleared. If this institutional shift surprises you, subscribe before we break down what happened next. What makes this moment so catastrophic for the royal family is that Annabelle Elliot was there for every single secret. She was there when Charles admitted his infidelity on national television. She was in the private rooms when the letters were written, when the media deals were struck, and when the late Queen was lobbied to grant Camilla the title of Queen Consort. Annabelle knows where every record is kept. She knows what was said when the doors were shut. And persistent rumors from within her inner circle suggest she kept a private, handwritten journal detailing every single moment of it. Hi viewers, do you think a person can stay completely genuine when they gain ultimate power? Or does power always reveal who they truly were all along? The timing of this betrayal is what is driving Clarence House into complete panic. For decades, Annabelle was the loyal shadow. But something fundamentally fractured once Camilla took the throne. The moment the crown touched her head, the woman who had spent 30 years acting patient and deferential suddenly changed. Staff at Clarence House noticed it instantly. Quiet requests became non-negotiable demands. Appearances were rigidly choreographed, but the real breaking point was Camilla's sudden, aggressive push to elevate her own non-royal children and grandchildren, attempting to secure official titles and funding for her personal bloodline at the direct expense of Prince William, Kate Middleton, and the memory of Diana. Annabelle watched her sister turn a long-term survival strategy into a dynasty-building project. And for a woman who had quietly admired Kate Middleton's grace under pressure, watching the same institutional machinery begin to target Kate was the final straw. Sources say Annabelle admitted over brunch last autumn, Diana never stood a chance. She was too human, and we were too afraid to defend her. That wasn't just an observation. That was 30 years of buried guilt finally exploding to the surface. To fully grasp the magnitude of what is happening inside the royal gates right now, you have to look back to the dark summer of 1997. When the news of Diana's horrific accident broke, the entire nation stopped breathing. Public grief quickly turned into absolute fury, and almost all of that fury was pointed squarely at Camilla. Outside her country home, angry crowds gathered. Her image was painted over in public spaces. The media pressure was so suffocating that she literally could not step outside her own front door without security escorts. Behind those tightly drawn curtains, an emergency strategy was born. It was a pact, forged in absolute secrecy. The rules were simple: utter silence, total resistance to media bait, and a pledge that family members would never, under any circumstances, defend themselves in public. Annabelle was right there beside her sister when that pact was made. She agreed to absorb the public backlash, to step into the dark background, and to act as Camilla's primary shield against a hostile world. For 30 long years, Annabelle played her part flawlessly. She sat through endless crisis meetings, held her sister's hand during periods of terrifying isolation, and watched the palace public relations machine construct a brand new narrative from scratch. That narrative was built on a very specific foundation: patience, humbleness, and quiet devotion. The public was told day after day that Camilla never wanted the spotlight, never asked for titles, and certainly never plotted to displace anyone. We were told she was simply a woman in love, quietly enduring national hatred until the public finally saw her true heart. It was a brilliant story, but according to Annabelle's recent private admissions, it was entirely an illusion. Behind the closed doors of Clarence House, the strategy was far more active than anyone outside was allowed to see. Every single charity sponsorship was selected for maximum image rehabilitation. Every rare public interview was rehearsed for weeks to guarantee the correct tone of modest restraint. Every single royal aide who expressed doubt about Camilla's eventual elevation was systematically replaced. Annabelle watched this cold, methodical operation unfold day after day. She saw how media figures were quietly cultivated, how long-held royal traditions were slowly rewritten, and how even senior members of the royal household were brought into line one by one. For years, Annabelle convinced herself that this aggressive PR campaign was simply necessary for survival. She told herself that once the ultimate goal was achieved, once her sister was safely accepted by the public and accepted by the royal firm, the tension would drop, the political games would end, and their private family dynamic would return to normal. She waited 3 decades for that moment to arrive. Instead, the moment the crown was placed on Camilla's head, the atmosphere shifted instantly from defensive protection to aggressive assertion of authority. Senior aides who had spent decades serving the royal family reported an immediate change in tone. The quiet, self-effacing demeanor evaporated overnight. Formal requests turned into sharp directives. Long-standing protocols regarding family hierarchy were brushed aside. And most disturbingly to Annabelle, the drive for control began targeting the next generation of the royal family. Annabelle saw the subtle moves being made to secure permanent royal status, official security allocations, and financial support for Camilla's own children, Tom and Laura, and her grandchildren. She watched as seating arrangements at major state functions were deliberately adjusted, placing non-royal relatives in prominent positions, while traditional royal protocols were quietly bent. To the outside world, these might have looked like harmless family inclusion, but to someone who had spent 30 years watching the palace machinery work, it was a clear attempt to re-engineer the royal lineage itself. The breaking point came when the focus shifted toward Prince William and Kate Middleton. Watching Kate navigate the exact same institutional pressure, the exact same media intrusions, and the exact same internal power plays that had broken Princess Diana 30 years earlier triggered a wave of profound guilt in Annabelle. She realized that by keeping silent for 3 decades, she hadn't just protected her sister, she had helped build a ruthless political operation that was now expanding its reach. Now, the communication between the sisters has completely stopped. Queen Camilla is reportedly furious, terrified, and utterly blindsided. Because the palace knows a fundamental truth. You can rebrand a mistress into a queen consort with 20 years of clever public relations, but you cannot rebrand your own sister's testimony. The vault has been kicked open. The journals exist. The silence is broken. And as Buckingham Palace holds its breath waiting to see what leaks next, the entire world is realizing that the patient, misunderstood woman who earned her place through quiet devotion was just an image. The real story, the cold, calculated game played behind closed doors, is finally being told by the only person who was inside the room for every single second of it. By March 12, 2026, the quiet tension that had been brewing behind palace walls finally took concrete form on paper. It arrived not as a dramatic public announcement, but as a formal administrative review, known internally as the Royal Household Reallocation Audit, document reference CR 2026-88. On its surface, the paper looked completely routine. It was stamped by the Privy Purse and Sovereign Grant Executive Committee, framed as a modernizing effort to align historical estate management with current operational needs. It looked harmless. It was anything but. This document was the exact trigger that moved 30 years of hidden family drama into institutional action. The audit sought to systematically review and quietly adjust long-settled arrangements regarding royal patronages, ancestral living spaces, and official funding allocations. But those close to the inner workings of the household quickly realized what was actually happening beneath the bureaucratic jargon. The paper trail was moving. The power was shifting. The campaign began with small, incremental moves that were individually easy to deny. Protocol officers began noticing subtle adjustments to seating arrangements and official schedules at state functions. Relatives from Camilla's non-royal bloodline were quietly being moved into prominent positions, while established figures were nudged toward the margins. The explanations offered were always smooth and professional, attributed to guest list capacity, security updates, or schedule streamlining. Then came the second incident. Historical displays and personal items linked to the Spencer legacy were quietly moved out of primary drawing rooms in key royal residences. Staff members who noticed were told it was simply part of routine interior curation. Each action, taken on its own, seemed trivial enough to explain away. Taken together, they represented a steady, relentless expansion of territory. The midpoint reveal of the audit brought the true motive into sharp focus. This was not a routine administrative cleanup. It was an aggressive effort by Camilla to secure permanent official titles, security details, and long-term funding for her own children and grandchildren, effectively attempting to graft her personal bloodline onto the official financial structures of the monarchy itself. The institutional double standard was impossible to ignore. Prince William and Kate Middleton strictly adhered to every financial guideline set by the sovereign grant, keeping their extended family entirely separate from official palace operations. Meanwhile, a completely different set of rules was being written for the Queen Consort's side of the family. Neutral expenditure records confirmed the quiet reallocation of funds. Annabelle Elliot was the very first person outside the immediate royal circle to recognize what this audit truly meant. She saw the paper. She recognized the strategy. When a formal administrative notice arrived at Annabelle's Cotswolds residence, asking her to sign an updated, binding non-disclosure agreement, the system hit an unexpected wall. The document was intended to legally seal her silence forever, barring her from speaking about past or present household decisions under threat of immediate legal action. She held the pen over the signature line for a long time. Then she set it down. Annabelle refused to sign. That single act of refusal sent a shockwave directly through Clarence House. For 30 years, Annabelle had been the reliable, silent partner in her sister's long rise to power. She had accepted every request, absorbed every scandal, and guarded every secret without hesitation. Her refusal to sign was a declaration that the silent pact was officially broken. The palace inner circle was completely unprepared for her resistance. They had assumed her loyalty was absolute, woven so deeply into her identity that she would follow any order issued from the throne. They failed to realize that Annabelle was not refusing out of spite or a desire for financial gain. She was refusing out of profound, unshakable fatigue. The refusal created an immediate crisis inside the private secretariat. If Annabelle would not sign the updated agreement, her existing historical knowledge became an unexploded weapon, sitting in the middle of the institution. Every private conversation, every strategic meeting from 1995 onward, and every hidden letter was suddenly exposed. The panic behind closed doors was instantaneous. Phone calls went unanswered. Emergency meetings were convened without formal entries in the official daily court circular. Why would a sister who offered 30 years of total devotion suddenly draw a line in the sand? The answer lay in what Annabelle had been forced to watch over the preceding months. She had sat back and observed as Kate Middleton navigated intense, relentless public scrutiny and internal institutional pressure. Annabelle watched Kate handle the overwhelming weight of her position with the exact same quiet grace and vulnerability that Princess Diana had once attempted to maintain 30 years earlier. The parallels were terrifying. The emotional contrast became unbearable to witness. As the details of the Cotswolds dinner party continued to leak into trusted insider circles, the true depth of Annabelle's internal burden was laid bare. She had not just spoken about her sister's drive for control, she had spoken directly about 1995. She had brought up the painful, unvarnished memory of watching Princess Diana crumble under the weight of isolation, while those around her remained completely silent. Her leaked confession was direct and uncompromising. We saw how broken Diana was, and we remained quiet. She exposed the cold truth behind her sister's rise to the crown. Diana was not a rival Camilla had fought and defeated in open conflict. Diana was a storm that Camilla had calculatedly waited out. While the nation wept and the world grieved, Camilla had focused entirely on long-term position management. There was no public reflection, no quiet step back, and no apology. There was only the steady, patient waiting game. waiting until the public outrage inevitably burned itself out so she could step directly into the space that had been cleared. Annabelle confessed that watching that strategy play out in real time and actively participating in the silence that enabled it had left a permanent stain on her conscience. When Queen Camilla discovered that her younger sister had flatly refused to sign the updated non-disclosure agreement, the reaction was swift and absolute. A direct phone call was placed to the Cotswolds estate. The conversation was brief, cold, and devastatingly final. No screaming took place. No insults were traded. Instead, an icy, impenetrable silence settled between the two sisters. Communication between them ceased completely for the first time in their lives. The operational doors were locked, the personal channels were severed, and the woman who had served as Camilla's primary emotional anchor for 6 decades was officially exiled from the inner circle. But exiling a witness does not erase what that witness knows. As the silence between the sisters expanded, the leaked transcript of Annabelle's Cotswolds dinner remarks was quietly passed upward through official channels. It moved from security officers to senior advisors, and finally into the hands of Prince William himself. Sitting in his office, reading the transcribed words of the woman who had watched his mother's tragedy from the inside, William realized something momentous. This was no longer just about managing ongoing palace gossip or protecting current press operations. This was the key that proved how his mother had been systematically isolated behind closed doors 30 years ago. The document in his hands confirmed every suspicion he had quietly carried since childhood. It laid bare the mechanics of the waiting game, the cold calculation behind the public relations campaign, and the relentless drive that was now threatening to target his own wife and children. William looked up from the paper, his face completely pale and set in stone. The investigation inside the palace was over. The truth was fully exposed in black and white. The stage was now set for an unprecedented, face-to-face confrontation inside the royal household. A moment where decades of quiet maneuvering would finally run out of room to hide. By the second week of April 2026, the quiet shadow play behind palace doors reached its inevitable breaking point. The tension was no longer confined to leaked reports, quiet phone calls, or administrative paper trails. Prince William stepped forward. He did not issue a public statement, nor did he leak grievances to favored media outlets. He chose the institutional path, a direct, face-to-face confrontation inside the private sitting room at Clarence House. The room was heavy with history. King Charles sat in a winged armchair near the window, visibly worn, caught between the wife he had spent a lifetime legitimizing and the son who embodied the future of the crown. Queen Camilla stood near the fireplace. William entered alone. He carried no thick folders, only 2 primary items: the original 1997 family pact and a copy of the recent administrative audit CR 226-88. The dynamic in the room was instantly rigid. Camilla opened the exchange with a firm, practiced stance, asserting that the family structure and financial allocations needed to reflect the reality of who currently held the crown. She argued that authority required visible backing, that times had changed, and that her extended bloodline deserved proper institutional standing. William listened in absolute silence. He did not interrupt. He did not raise his voice. When she finished, William delivered a short, calm response that instantly reset the room's power dynamic. He stated clearly that the institutional structure remained as defined, without exception or expansion. Then came the leverage. William placed the 2 documents side by side on the small table between them. He cited the explicit terms of the 1997 pact, the solemn pledge that family influence would never be leveraged for personal line building at the expense of the core succession. He revealed that he was fully aware of Annabelle Elliot's verified historical entries from 1995, detailing how every step of the long strategy had been mapped out behind closed doors. The message was undeniable. Every private record from those critical years had been preserved. Then, William delivered the stopping line. He looked directly at his stepmother, his voice dropping to a measured, icy pitch. He said, "If her memory and our word are not worth the paper they were written on 30 years ago, your authority won't be worth much tomorrow." The sentence hung in the air like a physical strike. It was not a threat of public scandal. It was an absolute statement of institutional reality. If the foundational agreements that held the family together through its darkest hour were tossed aside for modern ambition, the legitimacy of the current throne itself would crumble from within. Camilla did not argue back. That was the primary tell. She recognized the precision of the trap. Any attempt to publicly deny the claims or force the administrative audit through would trigger the release of Annabelle's full, deposited diaries. The long game had met a firm, unyielding wall. The aftermath unfolded, not with dramatic public outbursts, but with swift, quiet, administrative finality. Within 48 hours of that meeting, Document Ref CR 2026-88 was quietly pulled from the Sovereign Grant Executive Committee's calendar. The proposed reallocation of ancestral spaces and official funding for non-royal relatives was permanently shelved. The paper trail was frozen. The expansion was stopped. The operational consequences ripple outward through the household today. Communication between Queen Camilla and her sister Annabelle has ceased entirely, replaced by cold, formal distance. Within the palace, operations have been split into isolated silos. Clarence House and Kensington Palace now function with complete independence, relying strictly on written memoranda rather than informal conversations. The impact on the next generation has been secured. Princess Charlotte's official position and future institutional role were formally locked into the core succession protocol, safe from any future administrative maneuvers. On paper, the resolution was sealed with cold, procedural precision. An official internal memorandum was issued, stating simply, "The Executive Committee confirms that all household distributions will strictly adhere to the 1997 sovereign mandate, without modification." To the outside world, nothing appeared to change. The public saw the royal family standing side by side on the palace balcony, waving to crowds, presenting a unified front under the bright morning sun. The smiles were practiced. The posture was immaculate. Privately, the fracture is absolute. There were no shouting matches on the balcony. There were no emotional scenes before the cameras. The records were filed, the heavy oak doors were closed, and on paper, the monarchy remained undisturbed. Decades of relentless image management, strategic patience, and quiet positioning were undone not by external enemies or tabloid exposés, but by the weight of a quiet truth, held by the one person who watched it all, from the inside. Annabelle Elliot sat in her quiet home in the Cotswolds, set her pen down, and closed her journal for the final time. The weight of 30 years of silence was finally lifted, even if the cost was her relationship with her only sister. Do you believe long-held silence can ever truly repair the damage of the past? Or does the truth always find a way to tear down the neatest illusions? Type truth in the comments if you believe the past always catches up, or silence if you think the crown was right to protect itself. Don't forget to like this video share it with anyone who follows the true story behind the palace walls, and hit that subscribe button, because what we just uncovered is only half of the picture. Next week, we turn our focus to an even more dangerous set of documents, a set of encrypted letters uncovered in the private estate of the late Queen's most trusted advisor, dated 3 weeks before Diana's fatal accident. A single handwritten note in those files contains a specific 6-digit code that officially proves who authorized the total media blackout on the night of the crash. You cannot afford to miss what comes next.